is for machines and tools whose only power source is electricity, which can be controlled by simply unplugging the power cord. This exception applies to both portable power tools and cord and plug connected equipment used at a fixed location. To qualify for this exception, you must have exclusive control over the plug, so that there's no way someone else could plug it in without your knowledge. If you meet this requirement, you may service the machine or perform tool changes without performing a lockout tagout process. And your employer does not need to have a written lockout tagout procedure for the machine. If you do not meet the exclusive control requirement, the equipment must be locked out during servicing, usually by using a cord cover that accepts a lock, like this one. This cord cover may also be required if the plug remains in an area where you cannot see it, such as around a corner. You should know that this cord and plug exception does not apply when there are 2 or more people servicing the machine, and also does not apply when the machine has 2 sources of energy, such as an electrical cord and compressed air. And if the machine is hardwired to the electrical supply, there's no cord and plug, so the exception cannot be used. Another exception permitted under the regulations applies to equipment that has a single energy source. Under this exception, you may lock out the energy by applying one lock to the equipment's energy isolating device. You must still apply lockout during the repair, but the procedure doesn't have to be in writing. However, there are specific requirements for equipment to meet this exception. The machine must have a single energy source that is readily identified and isolated. The machine has no potential for residual or stored energy after shutdown. The isolation and lockout process will completely de-energize the equipment during servicing. A single lockout device will achieve a locked out condition. The lockout device is under exclusive control of the authorized employee who is servicing the machine. The servicing or maintenance activity does not create a hazard for other employees. And this is important. The employer using this exception has had no accidents involving the unexpected release of hazardous energy during servicing operations. If more than one energy source is present, or more than one authorized employee is servicing the machine, the lockout tagout procedure must be in writing. Occasionally, part of servicing involves testing or positioning a machine or piece of equipment. Under these certain conditions, OSHA does allow for the temporary removal of lockout devices. In order to use this exception, you must carefully follow a specific sequence of steps. Remove all tools and materials from the area. Clear the area of all employees. Remove the lockout or tagout devices. Energize the machine and proceed with testing or positioning. Then turn off all systems and follow all lockout tagout procedures before continuing to work on the machine. During these temporary operations, the machine guards don't have to be reinstalled, but employees must be safely positioned when the machine is re-energized. Finally, this temporary exception is just that, temporary. It must not be used routinely. It is reserved for testing and repositioning only. During other servicing, the written lockout tagout procedures must be followed, and the machine must not be energized during the servicing activity.
By definition, we are supposed to follow OSHA's rules explicitly, but there are many times when it comes to maintenance where you can't do that. Hey, OSHA does have an allowance where we can bypass an OSHA rule as far as lockout goes, but we must have a plan in place, bringing in a supervisor, the director of maintenance, so that we can all agree how we're going to bypass an OSHA rule. The problem is, though, that we still have to make sure the employee does not get injured. And if an employee would get injured, even with our plan in place, then we would be violating OSHA rules because the plan means we are guaranteed that no one would get injured.
There are a couple of situations that may occur during lockout tagout operations that authorized employees and affected employees, as well as management, should be prepared for. Sometimes servicing a machine continues after a shift change. As we discussed earlier, the authorized employee who initiates the lockout tagout process will apply their own lock and tag. Now, here are the important requirements. First, the authorized employee who initiates the process may not simply hand over the key to the lockout tagout device to the authorized employee for the oncoming shift. And the oncoming shift's authorized employee may not remove the lockout device placed by the outgoing shift's authorized employee either. Rather, the oncoming shift's authorized employee applies his or her own lockout tagout device before the device is removed by the outgoing shift's authorized employee. If the second authorized employee does not complete the repairs and there's no third shift immediately following, he or she may remove the lock and replace it with a tag at the end of the shift. The oncoming first shift authorized employee removes the tag and applies his or her lock to continue with the repairs. An authorized employee simply leaves the machine locked out if workers on other shifts will not continue with the repair job. Another situation occurs when the authorized employee is for some reason unavailable to remove the lockout device. Clearly, a system of one person, one lock, one key is the preferred practice. But the regulations do not prohibit the employer from having strict control over an extra set of keys. Strict control means that specific steps must be taken before a second key or master key is used to remove a lockout tagout device. These steps should be outlined in the employer's energy control program. Access to the second key should be controlled by the employer in a way that prevents unauthorized personnel from using the key. And only persons who are trained and authorized should be allowed to remove a lock applied by another authorized employee. If the authorized employee who originally applied the lock is not available, but another authorized employee has verified that the machine is ready and safe to use, then the employer may remove the lock, even though the authorized employee who applied the lock is absent. Under this circumstance, the employer must inform the original authorized employee that the lock was removed before he or she reports back to work. I'm sure you can appreciate the danger if the original authorized employee returns to work assuming that the machine is still locked out after the employer has removed the lockout tagout device.
The other special situations that we encounter is if in the event that somebody would leave a lock on, we want to make sure that we just don't remove that lock arbitrarily. We want to get a hold of the supervisor and go through proper steps and procedures and trying to make sure that we understand what has happened, where that employee is located, and then making sure that the employee isn't injured in the event that we do start that equipment up once we remove that lock.
We've talked about the importance of lockout, tagout procedures and some of the specific requirements of the standard. I hope we've impressed upon you the potential for disaster if these procedures are ignored. But you don't have to take my word for it. OSHA maintains a database of incidents involving employee injuries while servicing or maintaining machinery. The event descriptions tell the stories. Worker is crushed while testing machine in dry run mode. Equipment cycles and worker suffers an amputation injury. Worker amputates fingertip while adjusting running machine. Obviously, the risks are significant. In fact, OSHA estimates that there are 3 million workers who service equipment and face the greatest risk. To help prevent these types of injuries, OSHA has established a standard for the control of hazardous energy. But the standard is only as effective as the employers and employees who implement and follow procedures designed to protect everyone in the workplace. Procedures that are commonly referred to as lockout tagout. Following these procedures begins with respecting the potential for the release of hazardous energy to cause injury. Know your role. Are you an authorized employee who follows the written procedures and applies lockout tagout devices to the machines you're servicing? Are you an affected employee who operates such a machine and must understand the lockout tagout process? Or are you an other employee who may not service or operate a particular machine, but who must understand lockout tagout to protect yourself and others? Whatever your role, understanding the reasons for lockout, tagout, and understanding the importance of following established written procedures is one of your key responsibilities. If you're uncertain about a particular machine or a specific lockout, tagout situation, it's critical that you act on the side of caution and ask a supervisor before proceeding. Doing so is the only sure way to protect life and limb from the dangers of hazardous energy.